Hello, everyone. I am Storyteller. Thank you for visiting this peaceful place. I know you are looking for something soothing to help you fall asleep, and I am here to accompany you. If you enjoy, please give me a like and subscribe, and let me know where you are from. Thank you. A growing hunger. I don't remember how I died, but I remember the gnawing cold. A cold deeper than my bones that cut right into my soul. I was no longer myself when I awoke. I was only a husk of a man, something else entirely. The fire roared in the hearth. It was casting shadows on the wall that danced with a chaotic rhythm. No matter how intense the flame grew, I couldn't shake off the intensity that took over my body. My blood turned to ice, but my hunger grew like that flame, and just like the fire, it was all-consuming. I had tried to hunt, but that was not what my body craved. Only one thing could appease this insatiable hunger. I sharpened my knife, the steel grazing over the fine points over and over. The sound grated into my ear. I needed to eat, and I needed to eat soon. I wasn't sure how long I was going to last. I pulled myself from the fire, clutching my knife and my lifeline, and put on my coat and boots. The cracked mirror by the door only showed an empty shell, sunken black eyes, white pale skin, and bloodless lips. I pushed the cabin door open and sank into the blanket of snow that lined the forest. The world had withered in my isolation. The never-ending storm raged relentlessly outside. The eerie silence was only disrupted by the crunch of my boots. The trees had frozen in place, their bony branches reaching up to the gray abyss above. It would be a miracle if my traps had caught anything today. They hadn't for the last 3 days, and I could tell I was running out of time before I left this cabin and sought something more. My lips salivated at the thought of flesh, warm and soft, sinking into my teeth. I shook away the thought and rushed towards the first trap. Nothing. The second. Nothing. The third. Nothing. Then, a voice rattled in the distance. No, not in the distance, near my cabin. It was quiet at first, but then the sound echoed through the skeleton trees. "Hello, anyone? I need help." My heart pounded. If I go back, would that be it? I hesitated. I could resist. It was my mortality that I clung to with the kind of hope a small child clings to his dreams. I turned back to the traps to check the final one. The man called for help again, banging on the closed cabin door. That forbidden thought arose. I tried to pull myself away, but I could only imagine myself sinking my teeth into his soft flesh, warming my body with his sweet blood. I was starving, more than starving, empty. I looked towards the other traps, knowing it would be pointless to waste any more energy. Against my better judgment, I hurried towards the voice because leaving the man to freeze outside in this world would be no different than murder. I emerged from the tree line to see an outline of a man. The white from the snow blurred his figure, but he was alone and at my door. "Hello," he called again, as he walked over to the lone window on the side of the cabin. That wave of hope raced over me again. The longing for mortality whispered in my ear. The hunger subsided just for a bit as I found my voice. I had been silent for so long that it came out in a raspy mumble. "Hello." I raised my hand over my head to wave. A rusty and out-of-sync gesture. "Are you okay?" "Oh, thank God. Hello." He pressed his hands together. Was he happy? Scared? How long had I been out of practice in the art of socializing? I was out hunting and must have turned around. I have been out in the cold for some time. Do you have a phone I could use? My rusty muscles awkwardly formed a smile. The phone is out, but I can offer you a bed for the night. I approached him slowly, like prey, slower than I had approached my traps. "Where are your hunting buddies? Should I expect them as well?" "Our party got split up. I am hoping they get out of here before the storm worsens." I pushed past the man, his scent forcing my stomach into a spiral. It would be so easy. I could do it here. One stab into his throat, one moment of indulgence, one mistake. "Are you okay, sir?" The man's eyes met mine. His eyes were so tame, I felt so wild. I forced my hand on the door and opened it. The man slowly walked through the door and saw the fire. His face relaxed. "My name is Ben, by the way." "Nice to meet you." I pulled off my coat, throwing it over the back of the chair, then flung my boots off, not caring where they landed. "I would offer you food, but I don't have much myself." "Oh, that's okay. I am just grateful for your hospitality. I have a couple more rations as well if you need them." He followed my lead and took off his coat and boots, placing them on the hook beside the door. "And you are?" Who was I? I tried to search the depths of my mind. I reminded myself of my death, who I was in my old life. A chill worked up my spine. I would have to go with a lie. Silas. The name came out of my mouth in hesitation. "You can take the bed upstairs. I can sleep on the couch." "Thank you so much." He approached the fire and pushed his hand towards the flames. His sweet flesh singed the cabin. I gripped my knife and took 2 steps back. I had to resist. I could send him on his way after the storm passed. "This little place you got here is cozy. How long have you been here for?" Another question I had no answer to. It could have been weeks or years, another lie I had to conjure up. I tried not to make eye contact, just needed to get him upstairs and out of the house. I needed to fight this urge and pray for a decent meal in the traps tomorrow. A couple years, actually. He leaned closer to the fire. His smell encompassed the cabin even more. "My daughter and wife would love it up here." I winced. Did I have a family? A daughter? Son? It was a blur, and I was starting not to care. I pushed my finger into the edge of the blade, trying to think of anything else. "If you don't mind, I think I will be turning in for the night." Again, upstairs there is a bed. I gestured to the small stairs next to the kitchen. He nodded and disappeared upstairs. In the dead of night, I awoke to Ben snoring softly. The hunger surging. It had grown into its monster. I thought of the empty traps outside that would not fill any time soon, and the continuous snow that piled higher as time passed. I was going to starve out here. Ben was going to starve out here. I wasn't sure where I was, or where the nearest town was, and I dared go close to such a civilization, in fear of what would happen. I grabbed the knife out of my pocket and snuck upstairs. My breath fogged the cold air as I tried to tame my breathing. I was being too loud, chaotic, too wild. I could feel my body giving in, my beast within whispering louder. The voice promised relief, warmth, and satisfaction. I leaned over his body and pulled out my sharpened knife. The blade was ready for its kill after waiting for what seemed like centuries. It would be a mercy. Maybe the traps outside were empty, but this one had been set and tripped. By morning, the storm had passed. I stood in front of the deep hole that I frantically dug in the earth, blood staining the white frozen wasteland. My beast, the hunger, sated for now, but I feel no peace. The brief satisfaction that my prey gave me was fading quickly. I knew that he would demand more soon. I tossed the bones and other remains into the pit and fill it in, hiding all traces of my actions. For I am no longer human. I had died a long time ago, before Ben, before the season changed, before my memories were lost with time. I would no longer know the warmth of the world unless that warmth was from the flesh of another body. My memories are forever gone in the abyss of time, and whatever or whoever I was before is now swallowed by the beast. I walked back to the cabin in defeat, the hunger stirring again, stronger this time. I catch the scent of something in the wind. It is sweet and delicate. I turn towards the tree line. A group of hikers, their voices carried through the trees. There would be no more resistance. I headed towards the voices, knife in hand, knowing that this time my hunger would be sated. Elf off the shelf. From the beginning, there had only ever been one rule. Don't let anyone see you move. But after what I saw tonight, I was afraid I was going to have to break that rule. The Duncans' house was full of people. From inside Mrs. Mitchell's purse, I carefully peeked out through the open zipper and saw dozens of recognizable faces. People who had come over to pick up Oliver and Sleighs' friends over the years. They were all laughing and eating and drinking merrily. Despite Christmas having already passed. This I knew, because Mrs. Mitchell had already put me away for the season, which made it even more exciting when she had come back to retrieve me again so soon. Everyone was dressed festively in gold, green, and red. The Christmas tree was still brightly shining, and stockings still hung on the mantel above a lit fireplace. Jingle tunes buzzed across the room, and the smell of spiced cider simmered about. As I scanned the festive room, delighting in all its magic, I spotted a familiar face. But it was not just any face. No, this face looked quite like mine. So much like mine. In fact, I was certain it was mine. But was it possible? Another one of us had been granted access to such an exclusive event after Christmas? What were the odds? It took all my training and discipline, much like the effort I'd put forth when Mr. Mitchell accidentally dropped me in the toilet a few years back, not to call out and wave to my North Pole brother. Our mission had always been deemed a solo one. We'd known from the start that once we were sent off, it would be unlikely for us to see another of our kind again. Instead of calling out, I admired my fellow soldier for his composure and his stillness. His Mr. and Mrs. had him out for all to see. Not that we weren't used to being put on display. That was a rather big part of our job. But never had any of us, so I'd thought, been brought to an event like this. I imagined he was as gleeful and giddy about the whole thing as I was, but from where I watched, you'd never be able to tell. The sign of a strong soldier, indeed. Suddenly, a loud clinking sound echoed through the room. With a tap, tap, tap of his glass, Mr. Duncan had silenced the bustling crowd. "Good evening, everyone. I'm so delighted you're all here," he bellowed. "I'm pleased to welcome you to our 3rd annual Elf Off the Shelf ceremony, where we dedicated and loving parents, get to liberate ourselves from this torturous and time-consuming holiday tradition now that our children have outgrown their childish beliefs in the magic of Christmas. A loud cheer erupted across the room, but I didn't understand what they were cheering about. Liberate themselves? What holiday tradition? Tonight, we have two families who will be liberated: the Halberries and the Mitchells. Please give these lovely couples a congratulatory round of applause for their long years of shelving their elves. Another roar rose across the room, and it was then that I realized why Mrs. Mitchell had brought me here. Suddenly, I felt heavy. Heavier than I felt on the days when Mrs. Mitchell unboxed me, having grown stiff after months of storage. Heavier than Mr. Mitchell when he accidentally sat on me. I dropped down below the zipper of the purse, letting the darkness and the realization consume me. They've come to liberate themselves from me. But what did that mean? I heard Mr. Duncan start talking again, so I lifted my head up out of the zipper. Would either of you like to go first? Mr. Duncan stared toward Sarah Halberry on the other side of the room, and just as he was about to look in my direction, Sarah cried out, "I would!" Her hand was raised and flailing. Her enthusiasm stung, and I hoped Mrs. Mitchell would not be so thrilled to part from me. Surely, she wouldn't be, right? I snuck a peek at her face, but it was unreadable. Her eyes were glued on Sarah, who clutched my twin, Polly, between her fingers. Still, he did not flinch. What are they going to do with him? Chuckling at her enthusiasm, Mr. Duncan said, "Well, come on up here, darling. Bring old Polly with you for everyone to see." With Sarah now at Mr. Duncan's side, he began, "Well, Sarah, I can tell you're excited to get on with it. But we've got a few things to get through before we say goodbye to little Polly. Tell us, you dedicated how many years to this little guy? 17 years? Now, Sarah was holding Polly displayed on the palm of her hand, oscillating her arm from left to right to show the whole room his face. Whoa. 17 years? You must have started right when these little guys came out, huh? Sarah nodded proudly, but her eyes seemed to say something darker, nearly bulging out of her head. I sure did. Well, that's just fantastic. Really, really fantastic. So, let's see here, huh? Can you tell me one of your favorite memories with Polly? Mr. Duncan asked. My favorite memory. Sarah stopped turning and pulled Polly closer to herself, inspecting him. I noticed her face soften as her memory scanned the past, and I couldn't help think about my own favorite memory with the Mitchells, remembering the time she moved me into the fridge. It had been a cold night in there, but when Oliver found me in the morning, clutching an empty pickle jar, his childish giggles, warmed me right up. And when he and Schuyler told Mrs. Mitchell that I'd climbed into the fridge and ate all the pickles, Mrs. Mitchell pretended she knew nothing about it. That was the moment I fell in love with the Mitchell family. And that was why I was having such a hard time understanding why the Mitchells were planning to get rid of me. We were part of their families. Didn't they see that? I guess it would have to be the time I wrapped one of his legs with tissue paper and wrote a little sign next to him that said, "In recovery. I'll be healed in 3 days." Ugh, it was such a relief not to have to move him for half a week. The room exploded with more applause and cheering. I'd remembered when Mrs. Mitchell had done something similar, setting me up on a small towel underneath a houseplant. Her note had said that I was on a vacation and that I'd be back the next day. I'd appreciated the break. Having to hold still in all sorts of poses around the house is not exactly easy. But I'd thought she was doing it to relieve me, a kind reward for all my hard work. Very creative, Sarah. And those of us who are still shelving our elves certainly have a lot to learn from your innovative ideas, don't we? Now, care to indulge us in your worst memory with Polly? We like to end on a bad note, as it tends to make the final goodbye a little easier. Mr. Duncan chuckled. Something about the way he said, "final goodbye," made me uncomfortable, and Mrs. Halberry's sinister smile only made me feel worse. The worst memory with Polly? I watched as she squeezed Polly in her hands, and it felt as if I were the one between her tense grip. Now that's easy. The pause in her words held the room nearly silent, save for the crackling of the fire. It was not like the magical silence of stockings waiting to be filled by Santa on Christmas Eve. Rather, it was full of darkness. I couldn't take my eyes off of Mrs. Halberry and poor Polly, so helpless in her hands. And then he wasn't in her hands anymore. I'd barely heard Mrs. Halberry say, "All of it," before I saw Polly soaring in midair towards the fireplace, his smile brightly intact as he was flung into the flames. I watched, speechless, horrified, trembling, as Polly landed amidst the blazing inferno. The fire popped and bloomed as it devoured him, engulfing his hat and body instantly in vicious heat. My eyes begged me to make it stop, but I couldn't look away. I wanted to scream, "No," and to leap out of Mrs. Mitchell's purse and lunge to Polly's rescue, but I was frozen in my terror. Why was nobody doing anything? Why did nobody stop that wretched Mrs. Halberry? How could they let? That's when the sounds of celebration finally registered. They were cheering. They were whooping and hollering. I peeked a glance at Mrs. Mitchell and almost fainted at the sight of her. she was clapping, smiling even. What was this party of horror? Who was this woman I had dedicated my existence to? This was certainly not the Mrs. Mitchell I knew. This was, "Well done," Mr. Duncan guffawed, patting Mrs. Halberry on the shoulder. "Guess you were too eager to wait for the formalities, huh, Sarah? Feels good, doesn't it?" She was jumping up and down and clapping next to him, a smile as grand as a child's on Christmas morning. Monster. She was a monster. All right, dear. The whole party thanks you for your contribution and your entertainment. Why don't you go join Paul? And we'll invite the Mitchells up here for their liberation, shall we? If my heart had been working, it wasn't anymore. I dropped back into Mrs. Mitchell's purse, unsure if I had the discipline to conceal my terror. Somewhere inside me, I knew the truth, but I couldn't fight my denial from at least trying. Would the Mitchells really kill me? Mrs. Mitchell's hand found me and pulled me from my dark haven. In that moment, time seemed to slow down. Not like how it does on Christmas to assists Santa's impossible task, but like the sensation of fear, where every minute movement and sensation feels important because you're unsure if it will be your last. I had hoped all of it would be revealed as a dream, but as I rose out from the zipper, I saw the same malevolent faces, all of them staring hungrily in my direction. I'd had no context for such evils, had not even fathomed such perversities could exist around Christmas. And yet, there I was, the target of a ruthless and angry mob of parents. Mrs. Mitchell was quicker and peppier than I'd expected her to be, scurrying towards the front of the fireplace, eager for her turn at murderous betrayal. I did the only thing I knew how to do, the only thing I'd been trained to do. I remained still, sitting poised and cheerful in her hands as she showed me off to the pack of wolves like a sliced Christmas ham. "This is Skipper. We got him when our oldest was 2.5, so he's been a tradition in our home for nearly 14 years. I was so relieved when Skylar told me she no longer cared for the stupid thing." Gasp. What an awful thing to say. Carla told me about this little ceremony she conjured up a few years ago, and since then, I just couldn't wait for my day to come. A murmur was rising in the crowd when Mr. Mitchell made his way to Mrs. Mitchell's side. He wrapped his arm around her waist and said, "Oh, come on, dear. You're not even a little sad about it. It's the end of an era." People snickered, and Mr. Mitchell's smile grew wide. I recognized his joking tone, but now it felt like pure mockery. It made me wish I'd never forgiven him for leaving me in the bathroom that day. Mrs. Mitchell tilted her head in consideration and placed a hand on Mr. Mitchell's face. "Aw, honey, there's a lot about the kids being little that I'll miss. But this isn't one of them. Maybe if you'd been more helpful. She pinched his cheek, and they both giggled like mischievous beasts plotting their most vile acts. I helped, Mr. Mitchell defended. This time, it was mostly just the men in the room who laughed. You moved him twice in 14 years. They were great hiding places, Mrs. Mitchell scoffed. The toilet is not what I consider a great place, Sam. Okay, that time didn't count. I brought him to the bathroom with me and forgot about him. More to my point, you weren't helpful? Mrs. Mitchell pecked Mr. Mitchell on the lips. It's okay. I still love you. But you'll forgive me for being a little excited to not have to do this anymore. Mr. Duncan slung an arm around Mrs. Mitchell's shoulder. All right, you two. I can see you're just as eager as Sarah was, so should we get on with it then? We know Skipper's name, and I'm assuming your worst memory with him was this, toilet incident. Is that right, Sam? Are there any good memories with Skipper you care to share before your final goodbye? Lifeless in her hands, I willed her to remember all our good times together. They had to have been real to her. They had to have meant something, the way I know they meant something, not just to me, but to Skylar and Oliver. Remember their little faces, lit up each morning at the surprise of my new location. Remember how happy they were when Thanksgiving ended because they knew I would arrive soon. I'd brought joy to them for 14 years. How was it possible that they could throw me away? Well, there was one thing. Mrs. Mitchell's voice trailed off. I felt her grip loosen slightly, and a sparkle of hope twinkled in my soft, fluff-filled belly as she turned me in her hands to face her. Lifting me up to her eye level, she stared directly into mine, and I saw 1,000 memories swirling around her glistening green eyes. I'd always thought they looked like the most beautiful holiday wreaths in the world. I'd admired them so many times, but this time I begged her to return the favor. Which moment was she remembering now? The time I mowed the lawn? Or the time I built a gingerbread house and ate part of the roof? Whatever point in our past it was, I wondered if it would be enough to change her mind about all of this. Oh, never mind. All of it was just silly, and I'm so relieved to be done with it. Yeah! The crowd cheered, and my heart sank lower than the thermostat at the North Pole. She was really going to go through with it. What was I going to do? I heard Mr. Duncan spouting off more jokes, and I knew I was losing time. If I didn't do anything soon, I was about to be tossed into the fireplace alongside my now molten friend, Polly. Poor Polly. Had he even an inkling of what his fate had in store for him? Had he loved and trusted the Halberries as I had loved and trusted the Mitchells? I had not known him well, but I'd like to believe that if he'd had any idea about what they were going to do to him, he would have done something to stop it, even if it meant breaking the number one rule. I was still gazing into Mrs. Mitchell's eyes when I saw her lips beginning to form the words, "Goodbye." It was then that I decided I wouldn't let this happen. It was then that I broke my stillness. I leaned forward and slapped her across the face. "How dare you?" I huffed, and the sound of my own voice shocked me, for it had been many years since I heard it. I thought we were family, but families don't burn other members of their family. With my voice being so high-pitched and quiet, it took a moment for everyone to realize what was happening. But once they saw Mrs. Mitchell's face, frozen in an expression of horror, the room fell deathly silent. "Skipper?" Mrs. Mitchell breathed, but by then, I was already out of her hands. I jumped up onto the fireplace mantel and raced across it. I grabbed a hold of some tinsel garland and flew myself across the room towards the Christmas tree, grateful that this one still had its star-shaped tree topper. I remembered long, long ago when Santa had warned us that if we'd ever had an emergency, it was the tree toppers that could quickly transport us to safety. The fear that they might catch me fueled my speed, and quickly I climbed through the branches, the ornaments, and the string of lights all the way up to the top, feeling every single malicious eye searing through my back. Once I finally reached the top, I was breathless. I turned to face the room of malevolent demons and realized my fear had been unwarranted. None of them had moved an inch since I'd sprang into action. Every single one of them was frozen, mouth agape, and staring, as petrified as I had been, watching from within Mrs. Mitchell's purse. I even saw Sarah peek towards Polly's ashen remains in the fireplace. I scanned the faces of them all, and when I landed on the Mrs. Mitchell, I narrowed my eyes. "You owe Schuyler and Oliver a jar of pickles," I said. Then I placed my hand on the glistening star atop the Duncans' Christmas tree, and like a sudden stroke of magic, it was I who was finally liberated. 28 Sleighs Later. Above the laughter and Christmas music, the bang against the door came. Thump, thump, thumped. Paul Reyes sighed. He patted his wife's hand and pushed his chair away from the table. "Don't worry, love. I've got this one." Rosemary frowned at him. "But everybody's here. Who could it be?" He stopped. Rose had framed the doorbell with tinsel. You couldn't miss it. It would take a brain-dead person to knock instead of ringing. He shrugged. "Carolers, or something. I'll give 'em a quid and tell 'em to bugger off." A round of laughter rippled around the table. The playlist swapped over to Wham's Last Christmas. Outside in the front hall, the door shuddered again. Thump, thump, thump. It banged hard enough to make the door vibrate in its frame. Annoyance flickered in his mind. The nerve of some of these charity-begging types. He wasn't one to sniff at donations, but give a man ample time to get up. And don't knock his door down like you're the wolf versus the 3 little pigs. He hurried along in his slippers. I'm coming! Hold your horses! But still, the banging continued. Thump, thump, thump. The little panes of glass at the top of the door vibrated and threatened to shatter. The figure of a man swayed beyond, blurry and dark. Paul gritted his teeth. He'd have some stern words for whoever it was. It didn't matter what good cause they were raising money for. This behavior was downright rude. He slid the chain off and yanked the door open. Oh, for goodness sake, what's your prob? The man behind the door barged through, snarling and screeching. He wore a parka coat with its fur-ringed hood raised. It framed his mess of a face. He had blood smeared all across his skin, and his nose was missing. A window shattered somewhere in the back of the house, and a woman shrieked. Paul's stomach dropped, and he screamed. He grappled with the invader and grabbed a hold of his shoulders. What? He grunted. Let go of me. The man clawed at Paul's shirt. He leaned forward and snapped his teeth. His breath was rotten, and he had bits of ragged meat caught between his teeth. He snarled like a wildcat, and his eyes were white, except for tiny pinpricks of blackness in the center. He flinched backwards from the bites. It was almost as if the maniac wanted to bite his nose off, too, as revenge for losing his own. Whatever was wrong with him, drugs, he guessed. He was dangerous, and Paul had to stop him. Paul grabbed the nearest thing from the shelf on the wall, an animatronic snowman. He smacked the madman across the face with it. Jingle Bell Rock played from the crappy speakers, and the snowman started to boogie. Paul hit the man with it again and again. Get out! Get out! The man recoiled from each blow of the rubber decoration. He snarled and shrieked, backing away through the front door as Paul struck him. At some point, something mechanical cracked inside the snowman. The song came out slurred and slow. Jack Frost danced slower. One arm snapped off, and his head dented inwards. Blood smeared across his white body. Adrenaline surged through Paul's veins, reminding him of how it felt to be a young man. He became aware of his battle cry as he fought the mauled lunatic out of his home. With the noseless man wobbling on the threshold, Paul landed a kick into the guy's gut. "And stay out!" he roared. The man went sprawling backwards over the Reyes' front steps. He clattered into a heap at the foot of their driveway. At the top of the driveway staggered a group of people. 2 men and 4 women. Each had various ghastly wounds, like the noseless assailant. A cheek torn open here, an eye gouged out there. Intestines spilt out of one woman's belly and trailed behind her like a bridal train. Across his small patch of lawn in front of the lounge windows, a woman with one arm shambled towards him. Paul's nerves turned to liquid, and his legs to jelly. He whimpered and felt his bladder threaten to release. He scrambled for the door, missed, found the handle, and slammed it shut. With shaking hands, he slid the chain back across, his fingers slaked with gore. Jesus, 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 he whispered to himself. Immediately, the door began to bang again, and so did the windows looking into the lounge, and the screams from the back of the house continued, high-pitched and terrified. Goose flesh rippled up all over Paul's body. These nutcases had surrounded the house. He had no idea what they wanted, but he guessed it wasn't a cup of cocoa. He pushed off from the vibrating door and strode towards the sound of the commotion. He brandished his decoration/weapon. Rose, in the kitchen, some of the attackers had smashed their way through the windows. The glass sliced their forearms to ribbons, but they didn't care. They were trying to pull Rose out by her hair. She shrieked and kicked and batted at the hands to no avail. Several of their guests stood by and watched, their faces drawn in a rictus of shock. They still held their alcoholic beverages. Sean from next door had gone white, and his beer was tipping and spilling on the kitchen tiles. Paul froze. Rose had always argued about getting double glazing, but he'd deferred. He now wished he'd listened to his wife. How long until the front windows, looking out onto the lawn, shattered under the strain? He slapped himself across the face and raced into the fray, swinging Frosty for all his worth. He smacked at the hands that snaked through the glass over and over and over again. "Get off my wife, you damn hooligans." That broke the paralysis spell over the others. The kitchen became a flurry of activity as people dropped drinks and grabbed a hold of Rose. Gail Clark yanked on Rose's feet, pulling her back into the house. In his vest and tie combo, Sean lobbed his pint glass through the window with a violent yell. The claws clutching Rose weakened enough for her to break away. Rosemary collapsed to the floor, sobbing. She held her hands to the blotchy red patches of yanked-out hair. Paul's mind was a flurrying snowstorm of thought. He stood in the kitchen, chest heaving. He stared out at the people gathered in his back garden. "Zombies," he said, not quite believing himself. "They're goddamn zombies." The swaying figures closed in on the house. Bangs and clangs echoed from the front. The dim winter light faded as the bodies blocked out the windows. They moaned in a chorus of the dead, their bloodied hands slapping against the four walls. Someone asked, "What do we do, Paul?" I don't," a woman screeched. "They're coming down the fireplace." An ice shard speared through Paul's core, and the world seemed to slow. "Sweet baby Jesus," he mumbled. An enormous thud shook the foundations of the house. The survivors staggered to the walls for support. Paul shook his head clear. He tightened his grip on Frosty and ran for the lounge. He skidded to a halt as a cloud of coal dust settled across the room, coating the furniture and the tree. The hell? The smog cleared to reveal a massive man in a red and white suit. He kneeled, fists on either side, like the Terminator from that Schwarzenegger flick. A large brown sack slung over his shoulder. He had heavy-duty black boots, and a Santa hat clung to his head. Paul's insides shriveled. He'd fought off the one at the door because they'd been roughly the same size. But this one? No chance. He tried to speak, but found that all the spit had evaporated from his mouth. Only a tiny mouse-like squeak came from his vocal cords. The giant looked up. His eyes sparkled above two rosy cheeks. The orbs looked normal. No cataractic whiteness, narrowing to a black pinprick. A big, thick, white, bushy beard sprouted from his face. Paul dropped the damaged Frosty, which bounced to the laminate wooden floor. His head spun like he'd taken a right hook to the dome. "Santa?" Paul whimpered. Santa smiled, but the smile was fleeting. "Yes, Paul, it is me. Do not be afraid." He glanced at the window, which showed the growing horde pressing against it. "But you should be afraid of those naughty boys and girls." Paul's heart hammered high up in his chest, like a hummingbird trapped in his torso. His brain kept rifling through facts and thoughts as if to make sense of it all. His old thinker kept coming up short. It threw its cards in the air and searched through the rubble again. "What?" He licked his lips. "What do we do?" Santa grinned and stood up. He was 8 feet tall and towered over Paul and the others. If he were any taller, he wouldn't be able to stand upright in this house. He chuckled a deep, throaty laugh. "Ho, ho, ho." It rumbled through the earth like a bear's growl. Santa unslung his sack and upended it onto the living room floor. Machetes, blades, baseball bats, cricket bats, axes and chainsaws, swords and knives, flamethrowers and guns, even a grenade, and armor. It looked like police riot gear, except it had the symbol of a snowflake. "I have brought you well-behaved children, some toys to play with." Paul regained some of his lost nerve at the sight of the armory. With this elf-like giant on their side, they could turn the tides of battle. He bent down and picked up a chainsaw. "Groovy," Santa bowed. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a few 100,000 more homes to equip for the coming siege. Out beyond the front window, a reindeer with a red nose was fighting off zombies with its antlers. It was winning. Paul felt like someone had punched the wind out of him. His eyes darted from Santa to the fireplace. You mean you won't stay? Won't stay and fight? We won't last without you. I am afraid there are others who need me. Santa raised one gloved finger. Remember, Paul, jealousy and greed are very naughty. He gestured to the treasure hoard on the ground. I brought you these because you have all been good. Let us keep it that way. Will you at least tell us why this is happening? Santa narrowed his eyes. When there is no more room in ho-ho hell, the dead will walk the earth. And with that, he vanished back up the chimney in the blink of an eye. In the background, the glass front window started to crack. A lightning bolt fault line zigzagged. Paul revved the chainsaw and beckoned his friends and family. Let's do this. Everyone, arm yourselves. Rose, stay behind me. Put some armor on. Gail picked up a spear and donned a helmet. She pulled up alongside Paul and jabbed at the air between them and the fracturing window. A flurry of movement in the distance showed that Rudolph was still fending off the zombies. Gail screeched. Jesus is the only zombie we allow this time of year. Paul took the lead and strode forward, chainsaw in front like a jouster. Sean drew alongside with a shotgun. He pumped it, and 2 red shells bounced to the Reyes' rug. Sean had a steely look in his eyes that Paul had never seen before. He didn't even know the man could handle a gun. The only thing we should be eating is turkey. The window gave way, and the zombies flooded in. Paul raised the growling chainsaw and went to battle. Rest in peace on earth. O unholy night! Iceland's winter festivities are a perfect excuse to feast and make merry, and I partake with an insatiable appetite. I adore the endless nights wandering abroad and relish chance encounters with hapless stragglers trudging home. They all laugh when I tell them carol singings not to my taste, and chuckle when I say choristers are delightful and sweet. But how their mirth dissolves as I envelop them in my cloak and whisper, "What a toothsome treat you are. You're good enough to eat." I despise summer, like all cold-blooded creatures, preferring a catatonic sleep to roasting in the sun. Every autumn, I anticipate the evening when Ingvar disturbs my estivation, and I return to a nocturnal lifestyle. He disinters my casket from the family plot every year during the first week of December. It's a tradition my loyal retainer has followed for years, just like his father, and his father's father, ad infinitum. It's impossible to find reliable help these days. And so, despite Ingvar's poor social skills, I re-employ his services annually. Ingvar obeys my written orders to the letter on the pain of death. If not in this life, then his neck. Thwack, crunch. My mind basks in a dream state when Ingvar invades my solitude, hacking through the icebound earth above. Crake, skreek. I hear the shovel scrape debris off the wooden lid, and his doleful voice murmuring a tuneless refrain. The unsettling melody stirs my clouded mind like a moorland breeze whistling through gnarled branches. Its clashing dissonances offend my refined musical sensibilities and cause my heart to quiver and contract. Lub, dub, lub, dub, lub, dub. My constricted arteries dilate as Ingvar wrenches at the coffin nails with his claw hammer. His frenzied efforts cause minor explosions in the darkness, dusting the threadbare silk lining with clouds of grit. As Ingvar prizes open the ancient pine lid, my sensitive eyeballs roll upwards, avoiding the moon's inquisitive gaze. My rib cage twitches in a violent spasm as wheezing lung sacs inhale clean air. I choke and splutter before coughing out stale fumes that rasp my withered throat like a rusty file. With each heartbeat, blood churns throughout my aching body, carrying oxygen to every cell. It's always the most painful part of my awakening. Pins and needles prickle each desiccated sinew, and every limb screams as it receives life-giving fluid. The blood returns to the heart after delivering oxygen, and my mind explodes with predatory thoughts anew. My throbbing heart sends the blood to lungs that strain hard to collect more air. I reflux and retch a pint of sticky phlegm from deep down. Ingvar is used to this unsightly reaction and tends to the detritus with a clean cloth. His caring touch is delicate and professional, and his face is unflinching. He lacks any sentiment. This is his business. Ingvar had strict instructions prior to my exhumation. He was to source a flask of fresh blood by whatever means necessary. The task never varies, but the source depends whereabouts I resume my existence. We're never in the same town twice, for obvious reasons. He's learned to adapt to my circumstances with undeniable efficiency. Ingvar has my best interests at heart, and he's also on the payroll. This winter season, he's moored our vessel in a quiet northwestern harbor outside Sudavik. It's an unassuming fishing town with a medical center and a venue for blood donors. Once on shore, he disguised himself and liberated a quart from their supply. It's a rich-looking concoction that will suffice for now. However, it's not the same as sinking my teeth into a warm jugular and slurping on the real deal. Ingvar steadies my quivering hands as I raise the glass container to my lips. I close my weary eyelids, and after a few sips, everything calms down. My sweaty palms dry out, and my prune-like fingers appear to elongate as my skin tightens. The sagging flesh under my jaw disappears, and my furrowed brow loses its careworn lines. At last, the throbbing pain behind my eyeballs dissipates, and my labored breathing settles into a regular rhythm. My once erratic heart beat chugs at a steady rate, and the queasiness in my stomach eases after a discharge of rancid gas. My rejuvenation is complete, and I rise from the coffin to assume my full height, like a magnificent butterfly casting off its shriveled chrysalis and unfurling its wings before flight. I nod at my retainer, and he tips his forelock and bows. I acknowledge his endeavors with a satisfied smile and survey the snowbound nightscape, glistening like an ocean of diamonds under the moon's bashful glow. Ingvar wafts his left hand through the air, shepherding me towards the waiting brougham with his outstretched right arm. Two majestic black drays snort white plumes from flared nostrils beside my handsome carriage. We take our seats as pristine snowflakes descend and settle on the bodywork's polished ebony. It's a fine welcome and a tremendous relief to be undead once more. The sight of my baleful old vehicle cantering through the small coastal town of Sudavik draws little attention. In previous years, the ominous rumble of hooves and creaking coach springs would herald an unfamiliar guest. But the inhabitants have other issues this year. They've entombed themselves within their homes, battened down their pine window shutters, and laced their thresholds with wreaths of protective herbs, ensuring plenty of garlics on hand. It should flatter me they fear the visit of a malevolent nocturnal predator. However, the precautions aren't for my sole benefit. The coronavirus's arrival has influenced behavior, and the government has enforced a lockdown. Ingvar understood there were unusual circumstances this year, but thought it prudent to interrupt my deep slumbers regardless. My initial reaction was one of joy. What better return could I expect than to discover piles of bodies waiting to be devoured? However, it transpires that the Health and Safety Department has issued an edict. Local undertakers are to dispose of the corpses through the crematorium. The local council is determined to sanitize the town and cleanse the region. I hadn't connected the hazy fug lingering above the coastline with the current climate of dread. Sudavik's furnaces are working overtime to dispose of the deceased. The impact on my festive plans is catastrophic. Citizens locked away in their homes until further notice. No bodies languishing on mortuary slabs waiting for morticians, and funerals performed in secrecy with the bereaved attending by Zoom. None of these scenarios bode well for a creature of my particular inclinations. I'll need to redraft Ingvar's commands with caveats that cater to similar events. A do not resuscitate clause should cover matters in the future. As for now, we'll retreat to the mountains, and I'll ponder the options. Iceland's 13 days of celebrations leading up to Christmas are a disaster for all the residents. Children won't be leaving shoes beside their open bedroom windows. There'll be no trolls gifting trick-or-treats this year. The authorities have banned the Yule lads' nightly visits. It's a bleak prospect all round. I have some tough decisions to make as we ascend to my mountaintop fortress. Most years, I'd prowl along local shores, searching for lonesome visitors and lost souls. My spirit descends into a quagmire as I contemplate the prospect of scouring isolated fjords for bilious vagrants and ill-kempt vagabonds. It seems unlikely that I'll quench my thirst this winter. The locals have barricaded themselves in their homes, and according to Ingvar, they're low on stock at the blood bank. As the days trickle past, the wind howls like a wounded banshee, and the ground hardens to rock. The snows gather in drifts, blocking our descent and jeopardizing my strategic movements. Ingvar spends his days grooming the horses, and at night he sips his supplies of Brennivin. Most evenings he passes out from its effects, having buried himself under a mountain of furs. He knows his services are not required during these hard times, despite being primed to chauffeur me down the mountain on a whim. I've endured centuries of this existence. Life is relative, of course. It isn't a life most know. It's punishment for cheating death. Centuries of endless torture in purgatory. I'm cursed to roam forever, fearful of daylight, and all for a few drops of blood. I suppose it could be worse. There's a contagious disease in the vicinity. I guess it'd just be my luck if I contracted the coronavirus, wouldn't it? A year of coughing and wheezing inside my casket is inconceivable. The thought is most unappealing. And so, it's time to call it a night. Ingvar must enter my coffin until the epidemic's over. Maybe my luck will improve next year. VISE. News Real Talk. The art of soul swapping. New research proposes a radical solution for the estimated 13 million people who unwittingly lost their souls in last year's Black Friday mishap. While hell isn't offering refunds anytime soon, a soul swap isn't out of the question, says Sam Ackerman, sole author on the study and CEO of ExoSouls. His paper, titled Devilish Details, a sparse Bayesian learning framework for enhancing the ExoSouls algorithm, is published this week in Chaos, a non-linear journal of translational science. In it, Ackerman claims to have unraveled the 2-for-1 soul swap terms and conditions of the Philadelphia Screamer. He then introduces a machine learning model designed to identify likely victims who have yet to come forward, as well as predict the likelihood of unsold souls going to hell anyway. Ackerman goes on to suggest that when combined with his proprietary exosouls algorithm, this novel framework can accurately pair last year's Black Friday victims with unsold hellbound souls, a finding that could give hope to millions. VISE's own Brett Love spoke with Ackerman while putting his updated soul swap theory to the test in real time. This interview has not been edited for clarity or length because hard-hitting journalism has no filters. Q&A with Brett Love and Sam Ackerman. Brett: Love: so, how about you tell me why I'm stuck in Philadelphia traffic with a conch shell in my front seat? Sam Ackerman: great, right to the point. So, that conch shell is there to help you hear the screams of the damned. Cupping your hands to your ears is also an option, but that's more prone to error. I don't know if I like the sound of that. No one does. Now, as for the Philadelphia traffic, we need a bit more context for that one. You remember last year when the real Burning Man, who screams eternal, or simply the Philadelphia Screamer. Most people just call him Phil now. Sure, let's call him Phil. Anyway, after Phil showed up last year, screaming and burning and chained to the William Penn statue atop Philadelphia's City Hall with that Black Friday offer flaming across his torso, people were understandably curious. So, of course, someone flies a drone up there to get a closer look at this giant chained to the Will Penn statue. And forgive me for the recap, but let's not forget how incredible that moment was and still is today. I mean, he's bound there, like Prometheus, except instead of eagles tearing out his liver only for it to regrow, there's a flaming message that burns to life again and again, letter by letter, from neck to navel. It's Hell's version of a flashing neon sign, and it says, "Two souls take the place of one in Black Friday's shadow. Make your wish known, and they shall pay the price." Right. And who can blame people for thinking it's your classic 2-for-1 Black Friday deal? Exactly. Last year's tragic miscalculation really just came down to otherwise honest folk simply hoping to cheat Satan on one day of the year with no consequences whatsoever. They thought they could make their wildest wish come true while sacrificing the souls of two of their worst enemies. When you think about it, the choice of holiday makes perfect sense too. Halloween is too on the nose, and Christmas is off limits. But Thanksgiving is, well, it's a gobbledygook of whitewashed genocide and glorified capitalism. So Why wouldn't Satan want to piggyback on that? Just look, and you'll find him in the eyes of crazed consumers everywhere, in that Black Friday aftermath of filth left behind by the world's worst holiday. Wow. You really hate Thanksgiving. What about cranberry sauce? You'll cut out that last part, right? I don't want to turn off potential ExoSouls clients, sure. But you still haven't told me why I'm stuck in Philly traffic this Black Friday. Oh, right. So we already covered Phil, and the rest comes down to word origin. Before Black Friday found its way into the common parlance, it was used by Philadelphia traffic cops who were fed up with the crowds after Thanksgiving. This was back in the 1960s, so it all comes down to a simple misunderstanding. And hell probably wasn't trying to be nefarious here. I mean, they sent their screaming giant to Philadelphia, after all. They just thought that's where Black Friday applied. So they thought it was still 1960-something, even though Phil arrived in 2022. You're talking about relativity and time dilation, right? Yes. No. Not really. Listen, the theory of special relativity is a wonderful lens for examining the wonders of the universe, but it likely holds no meaning in hell. Perhaps whoever sent Phil is forced to experience a distorted sense of time passing on Earth to further highlight their own eternity in hell. A form of time torture, if you will. But that's just speculation, something that future research could explore. Regardless, my current research strongly suggests that hell's Black Friday deal only applies to Philadelphia traffic. What do you mean by suggests? I mean, I'm about to test your soul swap theory here, so you're sure, right? Please don't call it swap. I never mention that term once in my paper, and I don't know why the media keeps throwing it out there. This isn't the movie Freaky Friday. We're not switching souls or bodies or anything like that. Say exchange if you must, but it's in the company name, ExoSouls, with exo meaning external and souls meaning plural. It's a simple 2-for-1 exchange, and at no point do you swap souls with anyone else. Now, do you have the ExoSouls app installed on your phone, Brett? Yeah, but I'm asking if you're sure your soul swap. Is your theory correct? Listen, there are 1,000 different researchers giving 1,000 different reasons for last year's Black Friday mishap. They blame it on wildly irresponsible statistics, poor reading skills, TikTok trends, rising obesity rates, or excess levels of tryptophan. But not one has demonstrated as high a degree of correlation as I have. I'm sure you've already read the paper, but let me offer a quick recap for those who haven't. We know for a fact that people who have toned their souls see themselves with their eyes sewn shut every time they look in a mirror, while most hellbound people don't advertise that about themselves. We also know that there was a spike in self-reported eyes sewn shut sightings last year. likely due to outrage over misinterpreting Hell's Black Friday offer. Now, I used those reports as a starting point for constructing my sparse Bayesian learning framework while accounting for normal levels of dishonesty. In addition to identifying unreported victims, my model also identifies those with unsold souls who have high hellbound risk. However, the truly surprising finding comes when looking at the distribution of likely victims. It's a fairly regular distribution. That is, it's standard for places other than the city of brotherly love. More specifically, for places devoid of Philly traffic. What I'm saying is high-traffic Philadelphia areas are almost blank spots on that distribution map of likely victims from last year's Black Friday mishap. That's where people were able to take advantage of Hell's 2-for-1 offer, because that's the area that corresponds to Hell's definition of Black Friday. It's an incredibly strong correlation. And that's why you're stuck in Philly traffic this Black Friday, Brett. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think so. Maybe you could give a quick refresher on correlation versus causation. No, we don't want to risk traffic clearing up on us. Just Google ice cream drowning deaths after the interview. So, without further ado, could you please open the ExoSouls app, Brett? First, I've got to ask, why are we doing this over the phone? Why wouldn't you agree to a face-to-face interview? Selling one's soul can't be done in company. If you open the app, I'll guide you through it. Okay, app is open. Hey, nice interface. Kind of like Twitter, with less hate speech. And I just looked in the rear view mirror. I can say with relief that the eyes of my reflection aren't sewn shut. Well, we haven't done anything yet. To verify, can you tell me how many active users you see in the ExoSouls app? I see 437. Now it's 443. Hang on. Shouldn't the numbers be doubling with the 2-for-1 soul swap? Good. I see those same numbers. And remember, it's not a swap. The numbers aren't doubling for a couple reasons. First, not everyone is selling their souls simultaneously. Second, a number of users regain their souls with each transaction. Obviously, the total number of souls sold must increase over time, which is great for ExoSouls in terms of active users. But wait, you said some users regain their souls? Could you explain? You know it's reversible, right? It's in my chaos paper. I even mention it in the abstract. Sure, yeah, I know. But it may be worth explaining for the sake of the interview. Okay, traffic is looking steady, so I'll give a quick example. Hell's Black Friday 2-for-1 offer requires 3 souls. 1 soul to take advantage of the offer, and 2 more souls to pay the price. So, let's call the souls A, B, and C, and say they're all stuck in Philadelphia traffic. Imagine that A makes its soul-selling wish, which marks souls B and C as bound for hell when their time on Earth is done. Now, Say B, whose soul has already been sold, still wants to take advantage of the 2-for-1 offer. Hell owns B, but Hell doesn't care about individuals. Hell's goal is to simply gather as many souls as possible, so it would gladly trade B for 2 unclaimed souls. Soul A is still unclaimed, but we need another unclaimed soul to make B's transaction possible. That's where Soul D comes in. If Souls A and D reach out to Hell and offer their souls in place of B's, Hell can't refuse. Sure, it loses a soul, but it also gains 2. And Hell must grant B a wish for the 2-to-1 offer to still hold true. Within this scenario, the first wish led to 2 hell-bound souls, while the second wish results in a total of 3 hell-bound souls within the group. You can see that the number didn't double in this instance. Of course, that number could easily keep doubling if everyone keeps making the selfish decision. But that's the beauty of the ExoSouls app. Its algorithm was already working to balance mutual and self-interests. But this latest enhancement connects Black Friday victims with likely hellbound to boost cooperation and user engagement. Does that answer your reversibility question, Brett? Yeah. And then some. But I mean that in a good way. You have me convinced. How do I get started? Let's see. The algorithm wants you to sell your soul in the traditional way first. That means no taking advantage of the 2-for-1 offer just yet. After that, ExoSouls will pair you with 2 unclaimed souls, so you can regain your soul. Wow, I hesitate to use the word luck, but this is a rare instance in my experience. At the risk of sounding redundant, I'd even go so far as to say ultra rare. Brett, you get to make 2 incredible, near back-to-back wishes and still keep your soul this Black Friday. Oh man, I haven't thought about what I want. What do I click to make it happen? Haha, you don't click anything. ExoSouls points you to the best possible outcome. But this next part is low-tech, a tried-and-true method as old as mankind itself. First, what you want to do is pick up that conch shell from the passenger seat and hold it to your ear. Then, I want you to listen for the screams of the damned. Okay? I've got you on speakerphone and the conch shell to my ear. Do you hear the screams yet, Brett? Maybe. But that could just be Phil on top of City Hall. I think he's nearby. Forget about Phil. Think about the worst moment of your life. Relive it. Imagine that conch shell is a calcified ear that can hear your innermost thoughts. Whoa, I hear it. Jesus Christ. Keep that shell to you ear, Brett. Now tell me, how does traffic look? Oh God. Focus, Brett. How's traffic? Okay. It's nearly at a standstill. Good. Now, I want you to close your eyes nearly all the way until you're looking through your eyelashes. Then, stare at your reflection in the rear view mirror. Are you doing it? Yes. But I don't like this anymore. Don't stop. You're nearly there. Promise your soul for your heart's desire. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I want. Just wish for the first thing on your mind. There are no wrong answers here, Brett. If it's in hell's power to grant it, you'll get your wish. Oh man, I did it. The shell is silent and... oh God, that's awful. What do you see? I see my own eyes sewn shut in the mirror. How is that possible? Yeah, no one ever gets used to it. But the good news is I'm working on augmented reality glasses to add eyes to mirrors for those who've sold their souls. And the even better news is you've managed to successfully sell your soul. Now, exosouls should find a pair of unclaimed souls for you soon here. We're up to 643 active users, so maybe some are right next to you in traffic while we wait. And if you don't mind me asking, what was your wish? Well, it's kind of silly, but it was the first thing that came to mind. I wished for the traffic to clear up, and it's already moving at normal speed. Amazing. Although I guess I kind of wasted my first wish. You did a lot more than that. Do you somehow not understand words? For Christ's sake. You asked me twice why you were stuck in Philadelphia traffic. Shit. Can we try again next year? Well, what other option does everyone else have? Except for you, Brett. Sorry, but the ExoSoul's algorithm has banned you from the app. Good luck and goodbye, every last drop. I enter Red Square from the south side. It's late. There's no one else around. My footfalls echo across the bricks. Then I spot him, a slender figure beneath one of the cherry trees outside Drake Hall. Silvery white hair pulled back in a ponytail. Black gloves, combat boots, a wool trench coat, the preferred attire of all psychopaths. I reach into my purse. In the next instant, he is standing right beside me. Excuse me, miss. I pepper spray him in the face. He takes it stoically, with little more than a wince. I empty the entire can, but he just stands there, squinching like it's nothing but tepid water. Then he wipes his obsidian eyes clean with his gloved fingertips. I suppose I deserve that. I forget how fast we seem to you. Forgive me. I mean no harm. I will scream. You're Anika Chande, yes? From the physics department? Doctor, I say by reflex, sounding breathless. Who are you? Or what? Dr. Chande, forgive me, he repeats, extending a hand. My name is Sasha Volkov. I've read your books and all the papers you've published. Your work with photons is nothing short of brilliant. No pun intended. Thank you, I say flatly. I don't believe in auras. But if I did, his would be ice cold. I decline his handshake. I don't want my blood to crystallize in my veins. I'm hoping you will help me, he continues. You are perhaps the only one who can. I don't think so. His pencil-thin eyebrows pin together. You don't understand. No, you don't understand. You don't warp 15 yards across a plaza in the blink of an eye, demonstrate a superhuman immunity to capsaicin, and then ask for a favor. I see you're sporting a nice pair of fangs as well. That's very cute. Am I being punked? No, ma'am. He pulls a handkerchief out of his coat and mops his face with it. Although I have been told I look like Slavic Ashton Kutcher, I'm calling the campus police. Please, hear me out. Look, I'll show you. He walks into a beam of moonlight and vanishes. Not entirely. His outfit is still visible, but there's no one inside it. I start to deliver on my promise to scream, but the sound catches in my throat. The ludicrousness of the sight, the sheer improbability. I must be suffering a psychotic break from the stress of finals, or the sushi I had for lunch is causing hallucinations, makes me scoff and start laughing instead. Very impressive. Bravo. You see, the trench coat says, gloves raised in a gesture of helplessness. Somewhere along the way, our species developed this ability or disability, depending on your point of view, to disappear under direct light. That's why we're nocturnal. You might assume this gives us a natural predatory advantage, but it's actually incredibly frustrating. Imagine trying to eat a sandwich without being able to see your hands, and it's painful. The stronger the light, the more intense the discomfort. Is that why you live in Seattle? I snort. Because the sun is never out? Yes, exactly. Makes sense. I have a hunch. There may be some sort of interference at the quantum level between our body's atoms and solar photons. That's why we have no reflection and can't be captured on film. But the human mind can't abide the irrationality, so by rote, it forms a composite to make us appear whole. He returns to the shadows and rematerializes. A fancy illusion, just smoke and mirrors. Nothing to see here. No need for an anchor to drop into my stomach, or the hairs on the back of my neck to stand up. Nature had to find some way of keeping us in check, or we would have rendered you extinct by now. What do you want? I ask, wishing my voice didn't make me sound so fragile, so human. There was an article about you in the school newsletter recently. Thanks to a generous donation from someone who wished to remain anonymous, your lab was able to get a new quantum camera and an entangled photon detector. Volkov grins, his cobra-like fangs glistening even in the dark. I am that mysterious benefactor. and I want you to take my picture. Please stop messing with me. This really isn't funny at all. I'm quite serious, actually. We use simple objects for quantum imaging, like an emblem made out of gold and silicon. Not living beings. Well, according to your lore, I'm not really alive. Isn't that right? I grip the strap of my purse, certain at any moment I'm going to wake up in a puddle of my own drool at my desk, having fallen into a fever dream. Undead beings, then. The fact remains. You injure me, Doctor. I am not a zombie or a virus. My physiology is nearly identical to yours, with a few notable differences, of course. His stare is beyond unsettling. I cast my gaze towards the parking lot and keep it there in case he's trying to hypnotize me. It's very late. I need to be getting home to my family. He pretends not to hear me and carries on. I understand there may be challenges. That's why I'm asking you. You're the only one who can rise to the task. Mr. Volkov, whomever or whatever you are, I suggest you learn to take no for an answer. The first time, not the second or third or fourth. I stride away, making sure to keep my head held high, projecting indifference. Oh, come now, he says, voice dropping to an impossibly low pitch. I could just compel you to do it, but I'd rather you choose. This is an exciting opportunity for us both. My legs grow heavy. Against my will? How is he doing that? I stop in my tracks, my heartbeat rising rapidly into my throat. A mysterious gravity pulls me back in his direction, like my subconscious has staged a coup. I swallow against the growing certainty that this is actually happening. Only a monster would fail to see the false dichotomy of his proposal. All right then. Fine. In the lab, I keep the overhead lights off. The light from the monitors will have to suffice. As soon as we're inside, Volkov makes a beeline for the oversized Faraday cage one of my students built as part of her thesis. Like he knew it would be here, waiting for him. What material is this lined with? He asks through the open door. Aluminum foil. Ah, why? Worried it was silver? The muscles of his jaw twitch. No, that's another myth. Along with aversion to the crucifix, garlic, and wooden stakes. Nothing but superstitious nonsense, which, if I'm honest, I find rather insulting. I see. It's going to take a while to get everything prepared. I can wait, I hear him say. Except his lips didn't move. Much like your ascetic monks, we are capable of remaining motionless for protracted periods of time. Even when speaking into my mind, he sounds like a robot. Stop that. I don't like it. It's invasive. Forgive me, he says for the millionth time. But at least it's out loud. I set to work calibrating the laser with the beam splitter. Then ensure the quantum camera is in position to catch all the action. Once the photons pass through the vacuum chamber and into the Faraday cage, they will entangle with Volkov's atoms. Or won't. if there is indeed some sort of interference. Then the beam will be rejoined on the other side by a sensor. The high-precision spectrometer, along with the computer program on my laptop, will gather and interpret the data. You do understand that should we manage to get an image, it's going to be little more than a ghostly outline, right? Nothing like an actual photograph. When was the last time you saw your reflection, Doctor? In the bathroom, after class, I've never seen myself at all. Not in the surface of a lake, nor the glint of an eye, nor a darkened pane of glass. You cannot cast a shadow if you are never in the sun. I've commissioned sketches and paintings, of course, but it isn't the same, is it? I've never seen a real, tangible image of Sasha Volkov. He pauses. Because he's so still, I can't tell if he's battling with something or just going dormant. Can you imagine how that feels? To have so little confirmation of your very existence? I mean, I teach for a living. I shrug. I wonder how many people he's fed on. How many pints of blood he's drank. Thousands, he says, reading my thoughts again. Why is that relevant? I asked you not to do that. I can't help it. It's like asking me to ignore a blaring car alarm. If you want my help, then you can try. He doesn't move. Yet I feel his irritation growing, as though he's funneling his feelings directly into me. How many animals have you consumed in your lifetime? How many cows, chickens, fish? I'm vegan. Have been since 2006. Figured you would know that. The point is, you don't think of your food in those terms. Would you castigate a lion for feasting on a lamb? It is the way of things. We have been with you since the beginning, in the shade of your monuments, co-evolving. Nature designed us for a singular purpose, to cull the human herd. But as you can see, we're doing a piss-poor job of it. There's more of you than ever. In a surprising, potentially deceptive twist, I feel his emotions sink into self-pity, like he believes, ultimately, it is he who is the victim. Aren't your kind just humans who've been bitten and turned? Like Lestat and Lewis, his irritation blooms into full-blown disgust. Ridiculous. Can you turn a chimpanzee into a Homo sapiens? We reproduce the same way you mammals do, via fornication and pregnancy. We are warm-blooded, after all. It's just not our blood. It doesn't originate from our bone marrow. His anger cools a few degrees, and he adds, I have never been human, but I have lived. I have seen wonders and horrors you cannot begin to fathom. We have our own society, tucked away in the nooks and crannies of yours. Our own ambitions, too. Glad for the change of subject, I announce. We are ready to run our first trial. Please stop talking now and remain stationary. Volkov shuts the door and settles in. I click on the laser. The beam is split, and sent into the cage. The hum of the machinery comforts me, brings to mind the many students who've used it to embark on their first voyage into the realm of the subatomic. The inevitable look of rapture when they finally see the particles they've spent so long reading about. In the midst of this rumination, I realize it's providing a kind of psychic cover. My subject is occupied, the grip of his influence weakened. I slip a ballpoint pen into the pocket of my blazer and pray he doesn't notice. We run 6 trials in total. The whole process takes a little over 2 hours. Once it's finished, I take a screenshot of the results and send it to the printer in my office. Volkov exits the cage and joins me, and once it's printed, I hand him the copy. He accepts it like it's his birth certificate. Like I said, pretty grainy, but it worked, he murmurs. His fingers trace over the grayscale form, caressing it. He is totally transfixed. I feel his heady mixture of elation and awe, the vanity that coils around his heart like a serpent. "It's me," he whispers. "You got what you came for. I need to get going now. My family will be worried." Volkov gives me the side eye. "Surely you know by now that lying to me is pointless." "I don't know what you mean. If I don't get home soon, You live alone, Doctor. Have since your breakup with Paul. You don't own any pets. Nothing that depends on you for its survival. Not so much as a cactus. Your younger sister calls to check up on you every so often, but not often enough." He sounds bored with the subject, preferring to pore over the printout with the intensity of an art appraiser. "Is there anything else your system picked up on?" I push aside the sense of betrayal and shake my head. The emissions analysis produced a string of errors. That would seem to confirm your hypothesis of some kind of interference, as no entanglement occurred in any of the 6 runs. But it would take a much more thorough experiment to isolate the actual cause of that interference. "I see," he says, licking his chops. "No matter. Still a tremendous success." Unable to help myself, I blurt out, "Are you going to kill me now?" He blanches. He's probably manipulating me, but I can feel the sting of hurt feelings in his chest. "Of course not, Doctor. You have me all wrong." He clutches the printout in both hands and peers around the lab, taking it all in. "I want you to study me further. Enlist the help of others, if need be. People we can trust to test my DNA and take blood samples. Think about it. If we can produce more results like this, you can publish them. These findings will fundamentally alter the world's understanding of biology and quantum mechanics. And what might that do for your career?" When I don't say anything, he continues, "It's time Homo sapiens learned they are not so alone as they imagine. It is time for us to evolve beyond the predator/prey dynamic and work together We have to do something before your species gets us all killed with your utter disregard for the health of this planet. His eyes land on me. Despite his words, I feel sick to my stomach, because in his zeal, he's accidentally let slide a few of his memories. I see his first kill at just 4 years old, hunting with his father in the streets of Quebec. The elderly homeless man bundled up in a doorway, the pale, mottled flesh of his throat, the profound hunger, 1,000 times stronger than any I've ever experienced, an insatiable need. The man awakens and finds himself immobilized by Volkov's father. Fear pours out of him in a thick stench. His final thoughts are filled with deep regret. He's struggled so hard for so long, endured so much, and survived on so little, only to meet his end as some night creature's meal. And little Volkov loves it. Every drop of remorse, every pitiable whimper, every dream. He feeds on them along with the blood, gorges on the man's life force until he's full as a tick. And his father says simply, "Good." I see his most recent kill from earlier in the night. Stephanie Albright, the student who made the Faraday cage. He broke into her dorm and drained her in her sleep. She died and never saw it coming. Volkov looks at me now. He knows that I know. "Don't," he warns. I jam the ballpoint pen into his chest. My aim is perfect. It lodges between the ribs slightly, to the left of his sternum, and hits something hard, catching when he takes a breath. He growls at me. "I told you that wouldn't work." Then I'm soaring through the air. My body collides with the quantum camera, shattering it against the wall. I land in a heap on the floor, sparks raining down around me. Pain shoots up my spine, the wind knocked out of me. Volkov is on top of me in seconds, his weight like a 1,000-ton hydraulic press. There is no further possibility of fighting back. "Do it then," I hiss at him. "I will not be like the man in the streets. I will not go to my death without dignity. If he's going to eat me, let him taste nothing but pure hatred." "Do it, you fucking parasite!" He flinches again. I feel his emotions fan out in a kaleidoscope of rage, disappointment, and woe, beneath which is a childlike longing for my approval. He can't hide it now that I've seen it. His need for recognition that washes over me in waves. It's nearly as overwhelming as his hunger, an insecurity born of being raised with no mother. "We could have done important work together," he says, voice choked with repudiation. Remember that, then he's gone. His presence peels away like a bad dream. The overhead lights turn on. "Dr. Chande?" asks Officer Thompson. He's standing in the doorway, holding a nightstick The school won't let him carry a gun. Everything okay in here? Shakily, I get to my feet and survey the damage to the lab. Other than the broken camera, all the equipment is intact. There's no sign Volkov was ever here, except for the image on my laptop. I'm okay, officer, I say, but we need to send the local police to Stephanie Albright's dorm room. There's been a homicide. Gripping his stick closer, Thompson asks, "How do you know that?" I stare at the screen. Its spray pattern of photons in a vaguely humanoid shape. The world's first evidence of the supernatural. But it could be anything. No better than a UFO sighting or a blurry photograph of Bigfoot in the woods. I clear my throat and glance at the officer. In the wake of Volkov's influence, my emotions come flooding back with a vengeance. Hot tears spill down my face. I clear my throat and remind myself, no matter what I experience, I am a scientist. Call it a hunch. Gertrude Inn. The span of my childhood could be separated into two categories: knowing and not knowing. In fact, everyone in my family, even the adults, could split similarly. Those who knew and those who didn't. Regardless of which category you fell into, everyone knew Grandma had certain proclivities. It was an unspoken thing, yet you felt how heavily it threaded into every conversation and side comment at family gatherings. No one really talked about it, not outright, but it was always there, lingering between the lines. The not knowing part of my childhood wasn't all blissful ignorance. Like the not knowing adults, there were always hints of restlessness whenever we visited Grandma's house of mirrors. That's what everyone called it. Though, to the public, it was Gertrude Inn. A quaint, 3-story, 100-year-old 10-bedroom house operating as a bed and breakfast, run by someone in my family since its inception. Despite how often she smiled, Grandma had this way of putting the house on edge. In a way, the inn was a reflection of her. Aged, unique, beautiful, but full of secrets. Everyone walked on eggshells around her, though I'd never witnessed her so much as raise her voice. She smiled warmly, yet her eyes held a cold indifference that felt like she was seeing right through you, guts and all. Gertrude Inn sat in darkness during the day, supposedly to save on electricity. One single window and a shining beam of light brightened the winding corridors on each of the second and third floors. Those single sun rays felt so lively compared to all the shadows, with dust particles dancing in the warmth. My cousins used to make a game of only trying to walk in the sun, lest your legs get snatched by some faceless monster in the dark. There was some speculation that Gertrude Inn was haunted. Creaking floors and dim lighting aside, people reported strange sounds at all hours. Some guests even claimed to see ghosts. The inn had its own cult following amongst supernatural enthusiasts. who shared photos of specter light orbs and ghostly apparitions of small girls and old ladies online, because the old lady ghosts looked eerily similar to Grandma. It was widely accepted that it must have been the ghost of a woman in our family tree. But the thing that really made Gertrude Inn feel like a horror movie set was the mirrors. My great-grandfather built them, and over the last 100 years, the walls became filled, nearly every clean inch coated in aluminum reflection. That single sun ray from those lone windows on each floor bounced about, decorating the halls in a disorienting, masking glow. Around the time when I transitioned from not knowing to knowing, I gained a unique fascination with the mirrors. My cousins, aunts, and uncles liked to pretend they didn't exist. When we were delegated to help out around the inn, I'd watch the others stalk the halls ahead of me, carrying buckets of cleaning supplies and fresh sheets, never looking from left to right at the mirrors. Gazes fastened directly ahead, but I couldn't help but look back and forth, short as I was, fascinated by the different heights and styles of the framed mirrors around me, and how different and distorted they made me look, my face contorting and reshaping with each step. I liked to take my time in each bedroom when I cleaned, those walls equally covered in mirrors, making faces at myself and imagining someone else staring back at me. The year after Grandpa died, Grandma became more reclusive. One evening, my parents sent me to track her down, as she'd been missing since lunch, and it was long past dinner. Up to the 3rd floor, past the guest rooms, the further along I crept, the more the walls narrowed. A single sconce poorly illuminated the dark at each turn, but that one small light bounced off the mirrors, casting a dizzying glimmer. My reflection echoed all the way down the hallway, thousands of me watching back. Finally, I approached her room, and my hand shook as it clasped the vintage crystal doorknob, which spun loosely like it needed a repair, then pushed my way in. Her bed was made, complete with a crocheted white doily adorning an old quilt, another draped over a little red table, and a lit desk lamp that glowed beneath the stained glass lampshade. A soft humming caught my attention, but I couldn't tell where the sound was coming from. She wasn't anywhere in the tiny bedroom. I circled the space, trying to locate the source. The humming grew louder as I neared the armoire. I wouldn't consider myself a brave kid, but my curiosity was piqued, and no matter how hard my little heart rattled in my chest, or how sweaty my shaky hands felt, I pressed my ear to the closet door and listened. I gripped the metal handle, and the moment the door cracked open, Grandma's humming grew louder. Shoving dresses and shirts on coat hangers to the side, I stepped through a hole at the back of the closet. "Grandma?" I called out. The humming paused, then picked up again. I kept climbing, stepping over mounds of boots and boxes until I emerged into the brightest lit room in the house, and there were mirrors everywhere. "Hello, darling Mercy." Grandma gestured for me to join her, not the least bit surprised to see me. "What is all this?" I looked around in wonder at all the beautiful, ornate mirrors, some framed in elaborate gold filigree, some in thick, knotted wood. Grandma stood in front of 3 large glass panels, resting on a massive, open-backed easel. Paintbrush in hand, she elbowed me playfully. "How'd you find me, little bug? Is this how you make mirrors?" I looked around in wonder. Grandma didn't answer. Her humming resumed, as did her painting. I glanced down at the table and saw 3 identical empty frames, all silver, with intricate faces painted along the edges. The faces resembled cherubs, but their teeth looked more like fangs. Smiles distorted. I looked back at the glass she was painting and noticed something odd. "Grandma, how come you can see through these mirrors?" Her humming continued as she painted a silver metallic sheen on the glass. On one side, the silver allowed your reflection to stare back, but on the other, the glass was see-through, like a window. I wasn't a mirror expert, not like Grandma or my great-grandpa, but I broke a mirror when I was cleaning once, and I remember the backside being dark. You couldn't see through it like you could these. Grandma kept humming, and I was hungry, and that room creeped me out. So I shrugged and waved goodbye, reminding her my mom was looking for her. I dismissed the strange room, letting it remain tucked away in the recesses of my memory. Then, one weekend, I got assigned to room cleaning. We all took turns helping out at the inn, but it was more of a chore as I got older. The secrets of the old house held less interest for me. That is until I took a bottle of Windex into a room on the 2nd floor, spraying down one of the many mirrors, and I recognized the silver metal frame, intricately painted cherubs with fang-like teeth and distorted smiles staring back at me. The one-way mirrors. I tried to pull the mirror off the wall to look behind it, but was surprised to find it securely stuck. No matter how hard I tried to pull it off, it wouldn't budge. A cold chill ran down my spine as I recalled the secret room. That was when I realized there were 2 kinds of people in this family: those who knew and those who didn't. Grandma passed away a couple of years later, but still, I kept her secrets. My family argued about who would take care of the inn. It had been in our family for so long, no one wanted to give it up. But no one wanted to take responsibility for it either. Finally, they came to a compromise and decided to share the duties. So, one of our families would move into the inn each season to take care of the guests and keep Gertrude Inn up and running until someone stepped up and decided to take over the House of Mirrors. It was summer, when it was our turn. Mom and Dad claimed a bedroom on the first floor, and though no one wanted to sleep in Grandma's old room, I claimed it greedily. Gertrude Inn had a presence, a sort of sentient awareness, like you could feel her breathing. She tensed and held her breath, and so did I when I crept into the armoire that first night. I palmed the back of the old wardrobe, my hands sweaty as I searched for the secret knob. When I entered Grandma's secret room, it was pitch black. I stumbled around in the dark, seeking out the hanging lamps I remembered briefly from my only previous visit. But in my search, as my hands felt along the walls, I found another doorknob. My heart racing, I slowly twisted the tiny metal handle, the creaking sound like a thunderclap, considering the height of my nerves. My foot padded out ahead, testing the floor, and as both hands pressed against the narrow walls, I discovered a light switch. Though the light cast was dim, like everything else at Gertrude Inn, it was enough. Slowly, I stumbled into the corridor, merely 3 feet wide, between the bedrooms, floors creaking loudly beneath my bare feet. And then I watched in horror through the backs of the mirrors as guests slept the night away. I held every gasp and breath as my brain tried desperately to comprehend what I saw. A shriek tore out of my throat when I came upon a couple having sex, and the man stopped mid-thrust to whisper, "Did you hear that?" to his partner. My hand clasped over my mouth, terrified they'd know I was there, know what hid behind the mirrors. I turned around and ran back to the secret room. I turned off the light, banged my knee against a table in my rush to escape, and when I returned to my new bedroom, I stared at the armoire in screaming silence until the sun came up. It took hours to calm my racing heart, and in that time, I thought back to every interaction I'd ever had with my grandma. All the puzzle pieces and bits of memory I tucked away, slowly clicking into place. Walking over to a mirror, I stared back at my reflection until I no longer felt scared or uncomfortable. The following morning at breakfast, I watched my parents, not knowing, move around the kitchen in blissful ignorance, shaking cereal into bowls and discussing their days over morning coffee. "Mercy, you feeling okay?" Mom placed the back of her hand over my forehead, frowning. I cleared my throat. "Yeah, I'm good. Must have been a little weird to sleep in Grandma's room last night. No one would blame you if you decided to stay in another room. We can rework that one into a guest room." "No." Their eyes widen at my reaction. "Sorry. No, I'm good. Actually, it made me feel closer to her. And, you know, I was thinking, she showed me once how to make the mirrors. I think I'd like to take it over, learn the family business." I shrugged, and dug my spoon into the milky cereal, ignoring my parents' tight smiles. They don't want me to become like Grandma, even if they don't know precisely why. What I do know is that Gertrude Inn breathes for me, and I'll keep her secrets, maybe make a few of my own. Oil and water. The scrutiny of the gallery guard weighed on Spencer like a wet dressing gown. He'd felt watched since he pushed through the heavy doors into the guard's peacefully unvisited room. Spencer was tired from his unplanned journey and thought that the gallery of the unfamiliar town might offer sanctuary, a place where he could clear his head sufficiently to be able to plan his next move. He had ignored the guard, who lingered near a door-sized slab of a painting on the right wall of the gallery. He had turned immediately to the left wall and had been standing silently in front of the first painting, hung there for a couple of minutes, trying to think. He just needed to think. The painting was of a young artist sketching a large pig's head. The pig was dead in the profound way reserved for decapitated things, objectified by the disconnection, but somehow more of a head than ever in the absence of a body. The head suggested a hierarchy of death. Even a dead thing could be less dead than a pig with no head, or a head with no pig. Staring, Spencer became aware of the feeble beating of his heart. He needed to clear his head. Death was death, whatever the bristly head said. There were no less dead things. He was alive and still wanted to choose his own future. Still could, if he could only think of what to do. Conscious of the weight of his own tired meat, he shuffled away from the pig. Spencer's eyes scanned ahead of him as he crept along the left wall of the gallery, following the low metal barrier wire that kept visitors and paintings at arm's length. He sensed the guard watching him from his post next to a large, dark canvas on the right wall. He did not stop next to a huge oil of a group of idealized 19th century peasants. The most prominent figure, a rosy-cheeked girl, her delicate bare feet romantically invulnerable to the field's brutal stubble, was staring at him, as was the stern overseer who supervised the girl and her gleaning rabble. The eyes of the overseer and the gallery guard held Spencer in a pincer of disapproval. He kept walking and found relief in front of a benignly curving river, rolling past a grassed bank under skies of early autumn gray. Eyes were still on Spencer, glaring from their place on the right wall, cutting through his back like a barber surgeon. Spencer breathed, filling his pressured lungs, and held his ground in front of the painting of nothing. There were other footsteps in the gallery now, another body to share the guard's gaze and allow Spencer the space to think. The gleaning girl was not her. It didn't even look like her, except for the delicate bare feet, the last thing he'd seen as he left the bathroom. Bath softened and steaming, wet in the air. Her feet could never have survived the rough field. Footsteps moved around him now, softened by gallery etiquette. Spencer ignored them, choosing to see nobody in the hope that he would remain unseen. He focused on the painting. The river would wash the thoughts of her away. He could sweep away into the distance on its soft curve. But the future that the river flowed towards was empty. It mirrored the gray sky and carried the reflection of nothing to nowhere. Spencer couldn't let the water take him there. He moved on, feeling that the stare from the direction of the large, dark portrait was being unfairly reserved for him. Despite the presence of another moving around the space with him now, Spencer had driven when he should have been sleeping. He had imagined that he would find peace in the distance that he'd put between himself and the bathroom. But all he had done was stretch his fear over a greater space and carry it with him to a new town. His air-dried shirt stank, and his roomy eyes watched his tired feet trudge over the parquet, avoiding the ceaseless gaze of the guard. The next painting looked much more like her than the gleaning girl had. This young girl was sleeping. The soft pink arm curling around creased, plump pillows was hers. The arm belonged to the feet, steaming and pinkly clean, sticking up out of the water, hanging over the edge of the bath. This was a portrait of the arm that had once encircled him at the house of a mutual friend and made the deal between them. The small hand had settled on his back and told him the lie that she would never leave. After the clumsy, self-taught chess of their early relationship, they had moved into a flat together and settled into a domestic stalemate. Their dreamt future rapidly revealed itself to be unwinnable. His career prematurely lost with the part of him that he sacrificed to the medication. She became his whole unlosable life. If he could continue at all, then it could only be with her. She could never leave him, and he could never leave her. Spencer stared at the sleeping girl in the painting. Her short brown hair was still neat. Her sleep could only have been the briefest of naps. It was not the knotted mop that had once smothered the pillow next to his, the sun-catching nest for her late sleeping head. And neither was it the weightless weed that had billowed and writhed under the bath's hot water. The smooth, pink arm hadn't been strong enough to free the hair from the splash and suck of the water. But when the struggle was over, and the only movement was the curl of steam over the ripples cast by a single tear, the peace in her face was the same as that of the painting's sleeping girl. Spencer had given her peace and left none for himself. She could never leave him now. Spencer felt the guard's stare on his back. The footsteps of the other visitor were gone, and he bore the stare alone. The guard was staring with her eyes, bath poached and unblinking. They steamed into Spencer, seeing his past and keeping him tied to the present of the gallery. The guard knew. The paintings knew. Spencer turned quickly, forced to move by the suspicion of the guard and the watching walls. The guard was not there. There was nobody there. The wet footprints of some rain-chased visitor crossed the polished floor between him and the tall, dark portrait on the opposite wall. He followed the watery tracks towards the painting. He walked, transfixed, until his shins pulled the low barrier wire bowstring tight. And then he leant in further, creasing at the waist. His eyes dragged to the canvas. He looked at his own face, staring back at him. The last time he had looked at himself, he had seen a steam-softened reflection quivering over the rock pool of a slack mouth. Now he saw a perfect mirror image of himself, no less immaculate in its likeness for being scraped in thick oils. The red eyes were one slow blink away from the terror of sleep. Spencer's painted brow was creased in the frown that the image forced him to wear, but the shirt in the canvas still dripped with the splashes of struggle, and the hands, which hung limply at his sides, were pink and steaming. In the background, a bath, a murmuration of flicked brush strokes, showing the same gossamer steam rising from it that wreathed the pink hands. It was a masterpiece. Spencer was mesmerized. Footsteps came and went, clicking and squeaking around Spencer, indifferent to his fixation. His lower back burned as he leant in to the painting. He felt glances of concern slip over him and then vanish as visitors moved on and abandoned the petrified man. Spencer needed to move on too. He needed to look away from the pleading red eyes to continue his escape, but he could not. The barrier wire cut into his fleshless shins, and pain climbed up his legs to burn at the base of his craning spine. His mouth dried as his unblinking eyes gummed and seeped. After an unknown length of time, when Spencer saw the steam in the painting begin to curl and climb, creeping out of the frame, the lights went out. The darkness moved in the steam and rolled unseen towards Spencer. He felt its hot caress, and then the vapor settling and condensing in his raw throat. A hand, dripping, warm and small, found the base of his burning spine and pushed with an irresistible strength. Spencer surged forward into the blackness, back to the bathroom he had never escaped. If she could never leave him, then he would never leave her. The next morning, the gallery guard flicked a row of switches, triggering a staccato dawn, which bounced the rarely visited room rapidly in and out of existence. before it settled into the new day. As the guard took up his position, he noticed that wet footprints still marked the unmopped floor in front of the large, bleak painting of the man with rolled-up sleeves and the pallor of an unripe strawberry. Behind the man, glinting eyes peeked through a tangle of wet hair. Over the edge of a steaming bath, sails pitch, Molly pushed open the door of the conference room. It was a loud, heavy, metal one that left her fingers smelling of dust. She brushed them on her colorful leggings. The conference room wasn't well lit, but it was in a cheap motel on the side of the highway, so Molly hadn't expected much. It smelled of stale coffee and sugary pastries that were piled like faux gold on the table pressed against one wall. Sadie turned and smiled at her. The women embraced each other. "Thanks for coming out, beautiful," exclaimed Sadie. Molly nodded back, her eyebrows slightly raised at the memory of her husband, asking why she was bothering to come at all. She had explained that Sadie did help them move in, and she was always inviting her to things. But Molly always declined, and it was just preposterous. And the kids had sleepovers, so they were occupied and he had stopped listening. "I was happy to," said Molly. She released Sadie from her hug, but found that she held on. Awkwardly, Molly attempted to rewrap her arms around Sadie's long, thin body. That girl just never seemed to gain any weight. Sadie chuckled a bit and gestured at the pastries and coffee. "Coffee at 9 p.m., Sadie?" teased Molly. "I thought people liked coffee," protested Sadie. "We do. It's just a bit late, don't you think?" said Molly as she approached the table. "Sadie? Don't you think?" She repeated her question. "Sadie?" Molly spun around, but found her friend had walked off to the computer. She shrugged and snagged herself a cup, but the burnt smell put her off a bit. She grabbed a cherry Danish and a napkin before taking a seat on one of the black plastic chairs. "Oh," exclaimed Sadie. "Oh, sweetie, could you please sit in that chair?" She indicated the chair on the end of the row at the right-hand side, instead of in the middle where she could clearly see the presentation. "Sorry, babe. It's just, more gals are comin', so..." She let her O drag out uncomfortably and pursed her lips, and then smiled at Molly, who was scrambling with her pastry and purse. "Who else is coming?" asked Molly. Sadie spun on her heel. "What? Who else is coming?" repeated Molly as she settled into her new chair. "Oh, some gals from the book club, I hope, and some friends of mine." Her words trailed off. Molly began throwing her hair into a bun, an old habit she had when she got nervous. She tried to be polite and asked, "Do I know any of these friends?" "No, doll, but you'll love 'em, I promise," said Sadie as she marched over to Molly. "God, I do love that dress with those leggings. Just so cute. perfect for fall," she added, pointing with a polished red nail at the brightly covered leaves that dotted her friend's legs. Sadie grabbed a napkin. She dusted off the chair Molly was just in. Molly, for her part, opened up her mouth to protest that she wasn't dirty when another guest burst through the door. It was quite clear to Molly that Sadie knew this girl better than her because they squealed at the exact same decibel. Molly overheard Sadie mention something about work. At that word, Molly frowned. She remembered work. She remembered lunch with friends, gossip in the break room, and feeling like she was actually contributing to something. Of course, that was all before motherhood. Molly rolled her eyes to keep from crying and raised her pastry to her lips. A few tantalizing flakes fell off, but when she went to bite down, she found the treat rock hard. Disgusted, she removed it from her eye line and wrapped it up in the napkin. She sniffed her coffee warily, but found a similar level of grossness at the sight of shiny oil circles catching in the light flickering above her head. Molly sighed, longing for her warm bed and beloved husband's soft protests at random news articles that flashed by on the silent TV. She noted Sadie's new friend was permitted to sit in the middle, and that the woman didn't take a single snack or cup of tar. But hey, it wasn't like she was missing out. She was rail thin, just like Sadie. Perhaps she was part of the same spin class. A calendar without extracurricular for the kids certainly has more time. Molly sighed. A few more women entered. They came in pairs like on Noah's Ark. 2 women in all black dresses. 2 women in bright leggings that sent a bolt of envy up Molly's spine. 2 women in fur coats who didn't greet Sadie, but joined the first woman with bright red hair in the middle. Sadie kept looking at the door and checking her watch. At exactly 9:15, Sadie flicked the lights off and wobbled to the front in her high heels. The presentation had started. "Welcome, beautiful souls," flashed up on the screen. The words were decorated with pretty pink sparkles and brightly lit up the room. "Thank you for joining me so late tonight, my darlings. But as you know, I didn't want a single excuse about work running late." She clapped her hands together, and it echoed around the room. The side chatter stopped. "I want to talk to you about an exciting opportunity that has just changed my life for the better," began Sadie. She looked like a creepy ghost behind the bright light of the presentation. Molly suddenly felt very cold. "Before I get into the nitty-gritty details, I want to share all of the perks that this lifestyle has given me," said Sadie. She flashed the next screen, where bullet points began to zoom into focus as she read them out. "It has given me eternal youth, a low-calorie diet, which is totally customizable, incredible investment opportunities, and lifelong friendships." Suddenly, the door burst open. In walked two women, clearly late to the party. But Molly was relieved because their hair was in messy ponytails. They looked around the room and mumbled apologies. She thought she noticed a fruit pouch from the same brand she purchased sticking out of one woman's person. Sadie directed them to the chairs next to Molly, with a sour look on her face. Molly eagerly made room for the women. Sadie cleared her throat. Now that all of our guests have managed to arrive, she paused for dramatic effect, her gaze barreling down at Molly's row. We can continue the presentation. Molly's eyebrows furrowed with concern as she heard the words of her husband echoing back at her that this whole night was a bad idea because she didn't even know these women. But she missed the community of her old city. They had picnics in the park with the kids, a carpool schedule, neighborhood block parties. Of course, that was before it all fell apart. How can you get these opportunities and more, you may ask? Sadie's bright voice brought Molly back to the present, but got real screechy at the end of that question. Molly felt a cold shiver run down her back. It starts with me. My name is Sadie Malone. Sadie clicked the next slide, and a beautiful professional photo of Sadie in a power suit beneath a weeping willow appeared. And I have been involved with this group for, well, Sadie let out a giggle. Centuries. She flashed a winning smile and clicked to the next slide, which showed an edge of an acrylic painting of her flashed on screen. She was dressed in a medieval gown. The artist had captured the beauty of the very same tree from the previous slide, only smaller. Sadie seemed the same exact age. Her skin was less smooth, but the artist still captured it, creamy color against the backdrop of the rushing river. Molly listened for the sound of bird chirping, insects as they flew past her ear. It was as if she traveled back in time. The piece felt familiar, and she placed it as one she had seen during a visit to the art museum. A sense of dread began to fill her. Yep, that's me. Can you believe it? She asked. Sadie seemed to grow taller as she leaned into the audience. It's like I haven't aged a day, and neither will you if you choose to join our 3-step program. Her voice seemed to echo in Molly's ears. She felt herself growing tired and colder with each passing second. She readjusted her position in the chair and pinched herself to stay awake. The next slide showed a photo of Sadie embracing a woman in a side hug. This is BB, said Sadie. She looks kinda sad, doesn't she? Sadie's clicker turned into a single red laser dot, which darted over the woman's frumpy dress, unappealing limp hair, and sad teeth. Well, after 1 month with me, she went from this, Sadie clicked to the next slide, to this. Before them was a bright photo of a drop-dead gorgeous model who Molly swore she recognized from a red carpet or two. She wore a long, red ball gown, Her hair was curled into beautiful waves, and her smile was now white as bone. Now, I will warn you, ladies, that if you don't follow every step of this program, deadly consequences await you. Sadie's voice seemed to drop an octave, and the image of Bibi faded. Molly felt Sadie's icy blue eyes lasering into her. It felt like everyone left the room except the two of them. She felt safe and warm in her friend's gaze. The cold of the conference room had melted away, giving into the promise of eternal youth. I can't sleep, can't give in, mumbled Molly under her breath. If I sleep, I'll die, she continued, and gripped the cheap plastic chair with all her might. But I know you gorgeous, gorgeous gals aren't dumb enough to not listen to me, right? Exclaimed Sadie. The spell was broken. Bibi was back to being bright, as was Sadie's tone. Now for the nitty-gritty, darlings. And I want you to know, I'm only sharing this opportunity with you because I just feel so close to all of you, she said, as she clutched her hands into a fist around her heart. There were soft murmurings of agreement. The first step to this whole thing is to let me bite you. Sadie's voice had a tinge of glee at the very end. No, seriously, ladies, I'm not joking. I summoned you because I just think y'all will make the very best vampires in the whole gosh dang world. Because when I bite you, you pledge your undying loyalty and servitude to me, your BFF. And after that, you can host vampire parties of your very own. So you, too, can create your own vampire communities. Isn't that great? Then she used that icy gaze again. The world faded around Molly, and she was left in the embrace of her friend's warm spell as she said, "Just remember, you'll always be a part of mine, and loyalty to me always comes first. Best friends for life." Molly sat stunned in her chair. Her heartbeat pounded like in the movies. Sweat formed on her neck and dripped down her body. She felt like a child who had put too many blankets on the bed too early in the fall. It was just so hot. And Sadie had the solution. Sadie could cool her down. Sadie could fix her. She blinked her heavy eyelids a few times. Her face was fully relaxed. Subconsciously, her hand drifted to her neck. She felt it drift up her face, pull back, and slap her cheek as hard as it could. It was a technique her father had taught her as part of her driving lessons. Suddenly, as the room came back into view, something inside her screamed at her to run, grab her purse, and run. But it was like her legs couldn't or wouldn't move. Instead, she found herself staring at the presentation before her. Like zombies, the women beside her began to stand and join the line in front of Sadie. It was a horrible, perverse version of communion. Desperately, Molly looked around for the exit, but the darkness around her made it quite the challenge. She reached down for her purse, coffee, and pastry. Slowly, she stood up, suddenly thankful Sadie had forced her into the aisle seat. Molly was careful not to turn her back and was slightly transfixed at the sight of Sadie pulling the women in closer around herself. She seemed to be whispering soft words as she stroked one woman's long, red hair. Molly inched past the final row of chairs, careful to have it between her and the group of hypnotized victims. She used one hand to feel behind her, looking for the edge of the pastry table, but she backed in too quickly, and the table hit the wall. All eyes turned to Molly. "Ah!" screamed Molly. She decided at that moment to turn her back and look for the door. She sensed that the mob had turned and began to stumble over the chairs, reaching for her, grabbing at her. Their arms and hands were like vines. Molly searched her memory desperately as she replayed the night. She had moved chairs. She had been at the center. She had gotten a pastry and coffee. But which one had been closer to the door? Sadie's voice rang high above the moans of her servants. "Molly, Molly, come back, Molly. Please, won't you be the best vampire babe in the world? The coffee." The coffee had been closest to the door, so Molly turned herself around again and was face to face with the girl with red hair. Her eyes were glazed over. Her mouth hung open, and she was blocking Molly's path. As the other women began to draw closer to them, Molly scrambled with what to do. She felt a bit of coffee slosh over her hand, so she threw that in the girl's face. When she remained unfazed, Molly threw her pastry at the woman. This seemed to stun her, so she grabbed more pastries. Each one hit like the rocks they were, and slowly the stranger stumbled back. Molly bolted to the coffee, but was greeted by the pair of women in black dresses. They smiled at her, holding their hands out like friends. Their fangs glistened despite the lack of light. Molly smiled sweetly back, just so she could open the top of the silver carafe and push the coffee over. The women wailed in agony as burning hot coffee poured out. Molly found her door and pushed with all her might into an empty hotel hallway. She ran past the bewildered guests and the bored concierge. She considered telling them to call the cops, but knew from experience no one would believe her anyway. The burst of cold night air filled Molly with adrenaline. She pushed the alarm button on her car and ran to it. In the safety of her vehicle, she locked all the doors. She let out a guttural sob. "I just want friends," she wailed into the night. After a few moments, instinct kicked in and threw the car in reverse to get her home. James was asleep when Molly returned. She was shocked to find it was after midnight. She double, triple checked all the lights were on, and the doors were locked. So were the windows. As she approached the bed, she reached beneath her husband's pillow and wrapped cold fingers are the wooden stake. Then, her excuses. Ted body wrapped itself in the warmth of her husband and attempted to fall asleep to the rhythmic sound of his beating heart. Morning came and went. The work week came and went. By the following Saturday, the nightmares of the last week felt like a scary dream. Of course, that's when the letter came. It didn't come by postman or dropped off at work. It was nailed to Molly's front door one night when she got home from work. The letter's envelope wasn't like the normal white one you find at the office. The paper was rough and slightly yellowed, like when her son, Jake, had a school project, so they soaked paper in coffee to make it look old. And when Molly flipped it to the front, it bore a pretty, pink, sparkly seal with the letter S on it. Her husband told her, wait for him to open it. So after the kids went to bed, they sat up in theirs and slowly broke the seal. Inside was a sheet of paper which had Sadie's beautiful calligraphy that matched Molly's original invite to the conference. The message was short and sweet. I really think you should reconsider, babe, for your family's sake. Call me. S. Molly crumpled up the letter. You gotta admit, it's a new tactic. They usually just invite us over for a BBQ and a few cheap beers, James said with a laugh. Then, realizing his wife wasn't laughing with him, he added, guess it's time to move again. Molly remained quiet. A few tears gathered in her eyes. James once again tried to lighten the mood. You think one of them would figure out I'm a descendant of the Van Helsings before inviting you over? Maybe that's why they keep trying. Like some sick cat and mouse game, she replied, her voice trembling. Then, with a frown on her face, she added, I just wish I could find some real friends. He offered her a warm embrace, much more comforting than last night, as he whispered into her hair, someday you will, I promise. James was wise enough to let her pull away. She marched into James's home office. He couldn't see her eyes, and turned on the shredder. It roared to life, grinding the letter into tiny pieces of confetti.